Reimagining Success, episode 135. You're listening to Reimagining Success, the podcast where we help you reimagine your future, designing a life and career beyond the 9 to 5 that allows you the freedom, flexibility and fulfillment that you've been dreaming of. I'm your host, Anna Lundberg. Now, let's get started on those dreams. Hello, everybody, and for this month's interview, I'm here with Moira Newiss. Moira and I are part of the Youpreneur Incubator Mastermind. In fact, we have a long session together this afternoon, which we're excited about, and that's how I came across Moira. So I'm interested in hearing more about her, just as you all are. So Moira, why don't you start by telling us what were you doing previously in your career, and what are you doing today?
Okay, hi, thank you. So I'm Moira Newiss, and I'm a registered nutritional therapist. But I spent the major part of the last 20 years working as a senior manager in the NHS.
Perfect, short and sweet. So I guess, please, let's start with, the first question I wanted to ask you is of course, why did you make that change? So maybe if you tell us a bit more about that experience, 20 years, it's a lot of time in a particular industry, in a particular career. What was it? Was it sort of a slow burner? Was it a trigger point that made you take the leap? Tell us about that path to the decision that you made.
So I think when I look back at how I got to this point in life, it's quite interesting, really. So my parents were both employed in local authority jobs. One was a teacher and one was a town planner. I moved into tourism. And I probably always had the expectation that I would kind of go to a normal job kind of in local authority in some kind of role, like a nurse, a doctor, a teacher or something like that. But I actually had a passion at school for geology. So I went off and did a geology degree at Durham University. And when I was in my final few years, met my fiance, Andy, who I'm still with today. I'm pleased to say.
Oh, amazing.
I kind of decided at that point in time that being an exploration geologist and working out in Sumatra or Java was kind of my dream, but probably wasn't going to happen now I had a fiance. So I decided, well, I was lucky, actually. I went to a careers fair and I met a chap called Ned Greenwood, who I still remember to this day because he was really instrumental in my life. He was recruiting for the management training scheme, the graduate training scheme for the NHS at the time. And so I applied for that and got onto it and studied for a master's degree in strategic healthcare and went on to work in the NHS for the next 20 years. So I did start off working in a kind of more public health arena in Bootle in Merseyside with the poorest postcode in the UK, and absolutely loved that with a passion. I worked for a chap called Ian Williamson, who was an amazing inspiration to me, and he is still leading healthcare in Manchester today. And then I wanted to move to Scotland, so an opportunity came up to get into operational management, and we moved to Argyll 20 years ago. And I was really fortunate because I've had one of the best jobs in healthcare. I managed community district services and an acute hospital in one of the most beautiful areas of Scotland. And it was really fantastic, really. It was a fantastic job. I got to travel to the island, see the sunsets, and have worked with the most amazing professionals as well. And then I went on to work in business transformation and in human resources as well. So, yeah, that was kind of what I did for a long time.
I love that already, the journey of the geology initially. That sounds amazing. It's a shame about the fiance, but at least, you met him thanks to that choice. It's always good when there's something good that comes out of it, albeit not the international geology career. And then it sounds like a fortuitous meeting there at the careers fair as well. So, so 20 years there, beautiful working environment. What changed?
So I eventually burnt myself out. That's what happened to me. So I had a spell where when my kids were young, I'd been working full time in a pretty difficult job, quite high stress. And when I had my children, I had 3 years out and I went back on a part-time basis. And I think, to be honest, before that, I'd been struggling a bit with the stress, but it had never really affected me too greatly. But I think once you've got a young family as well, and you're trying to do a job that's quite difficult, and I eventually had to go back full time at one stage as well. And I had 2 years where I also worked as a managing partner in my local GP practice and occupational health consultancy as well. And I I did go back into the NHS after that in a more senior role in HR, and I probably should have left, to be honest. I think I could kind of see things weren't quite right. My energy levels had dropped a lot. I wasn't really feeling that my values any longer fitted totally with the organisation. And I think anyone who's worked in a senior level in the NHS knows that there's a huge amount of pressure to meet targets and deliver things. And I very strongly believed in delivering high quality services and doing it with your staff, alongside your staff, and working with them to be innovative in the way that you can deliver services so that you can make the savings and deliver good services. And it was getting more and more difficult to achieve both those things. So I think it kind of affected my values a bit as well. I felt a bit compromised, and that I wanted to do something different. And I want to get some of the passion back for life and do some adventurous things again too. Because as a teenager, just as well as the geology, I was actually quite adventurous, and I went on an expedition to South America, mountain biking and things like that. So I definitely was into the outdoors and the adventure world too.
And was that something you hadn't had a chance to do through those 20 years, I guess, and through having a young family?
I did to begin with. When we moved to Argyll, I did a lot of sea kayaking, and it's the most amazing place for sea kayak. And I used to do a lot of running and cycling. But as time went on, I used to go running with friends on a Friday night. And as time went on, I struggled to do that run on a Friday night because I was just so mentally and physically exhausted that I couldn't complete it any longer. And I think looking back now, there were probably signs that I was kind of struggling to cope a little bit, but I just kept going, as we all do. But a smile on my face during the day, but, you know, I would eventually come home and I'd be on the sofa and I couldn't make the dinner and I couldn't look after my children properly, really. So it was a bit of a shock to the system eventually to realise that actually what a physical effect that stress can have on the body as well as mentally. So I just wanted to live life again to the full, I suppose, and felt there was a different way to do things that would also help people still do some of the things that perhaps you couldn't do in the NHS for people's health. So I began to think about retraining as a nutritional therapist, something I've always loved food. So that has been a big thing for me. And I've always felt there's been a better way to help people with their nutrition and lifestyle health issues that can't be delivered in a 10-minute GP appointment, for example. So I wanted to be able to, as I left the NHS and I took time out, I got myself well again. I spent 3 years studying nutrition and eventually got back to what I felt was my teenage energy levels again. Which I didn't really expect to get quite back that far, but I did, which is fantastic.
Amazing.
And at the same time, I also started another company as well. So I run another company called Scare Skin, which is a sustainable sports skincare brand. And that comes from my love of sports, outdoor sports, adventure sports. And I kind of did that as a hobby to begin with, making skincare products for running and cycling and swimming. And eventually that's become a business too.
Amazing. So two businesses and following your passion in both areas. That's incredible. So talk us through the timeline. So you said it took you 3 years to study. So when was it you first, and were you doing that alongside the work with the NHS, or did you take a complete break?
No, I had a complete break. I had certainly a few months off in between. And I'd kind of really, the last kind of 2 years of the work I was doing, I'd already kind of begun to realise I had to change things and started to make changes. So I'd started to think this, something needs to change. So I'd begun to make changes, and then I took time out and I just focused on getting better, understanding how to manage my stress levels, getting out, getting exercise, eating well. I'm a big fan of sort of the biohacking idea, which is that use science to improve your health by making small adjustments. So everything from getting enough sunlight to using red lights to make sure that you're eating at the right times of day. Everything really, I used a combination of all those things as well as feeding myself well for all the right nutrients. So so I spent 3 years studying, and I've also done a bit of extra studying around sports nutrition and chronic fatigue as well. So,
but it's interesting because, as you say, as we do tend to just keep going until we can't, unfortunately, even though, as you said, you perhaps should have recognised it earlier, could have recognised it earlier, we don't, and we want to keep doing a good job. And it sounds also like you have the sort of push out of that environment because of the disconnect with your values, because of the burnout, but also then the pull towards living the life that you used to lead when you're younger and having both that adventure, but also, as you said, making an impact in people's lives. So what were some of the challenges you came across in that negotiating that transition, I guess, out of what you've been doing for a couple of decades into working for yourself in particular, and to launching 2 businesses, which sounds amazing?
That's a good question. I think I probably never thought about it quite in that way, but when I think back to why I was doing the job I was doing, I think a lot goes back to expectations in life when you're younger. I remember a conversation with my father at one point where I sort of said, oh, well, I'm not going to go to university. I've decided not to go. I'm going to stay at home. And he basically said, well, if you can't get a job in the next 2 weeks, then, that's it.
Okay. Tough love.
You find your own way in the world kind of thing. Not quite like that, but it was, and so I suppose I was slightly rebelling against perhaps expectation at that stage, but I got carried along with the flow in the end. I went off to university. I had a great time, so I don't regret that in any shape or form at all. I met a lot of friends who are still really good friends today, and I still love my geology, so that's all fantastic. And I did a lot of mountaineering and climbing and things at university too, which was also quite fundamental probably in who I am today. So I've probably forgotten the question.
The challenges about making that transition. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I gave up a good career and a good salary. So that was a financial hit. But I do have a husband who is an accountant. So we knew we had enough income
very handy
to do that. And he has been very, very supportive through everything. I also spent a lot of money retraining because I wasn't eligible for any grants or anything like that for it. So not only did I give up the salary, but I then had to, pay for several years, several £1,000s to retrain as well. I had to think about, I suppose it's perceptions partly as well from other people. Some people were quite surprised, I think, that they didn't really realise that I'd been ill because I hid it quite well. And I think that's one of the difficulties with the kind of with burnout as a condition is that people can still turn up at work, they can still smile, and you don't really know what's going on behind the scenes unless you ask them. And I think a lot of people didn't realise that I was struggling that much, to be honest. I was able to hide it quite well. And so it was quite difficult perhaps at that time explaining to people what was happening. I don't have that problem at all now. I speak out about it. I share my story because I think it's important for people to understand that, this is really common actually. And a lot of people struggle with fatigue at one level or another because it is a spectrum. You've got the energy spectrum is really big. You've got almost a sports performance on the one end of it, and then the opposite end is almost like the chronic fatigue end, and everybody's on that spectrum somewhere. So yeah, there were challenges. There was also huge challenges about how I was going to convert my learning into actually being a business and actually been able to sell my services as a nutritional therapist and sell my products through the skincare side of things. So that's been a massive learning curve, absolutely, and I'm still on it. So
aren't we all?
Still learning as we speak. Yeah.
Okay.
So that was, I had no background in that at all. So I've had a lot of support from the local enterprise company and from other things that I found myself, like the Upreneur support, and that's all been really, really helpful. At least.
So of course there was the retraining, you had the supportive accountant husband, which sounds very handy, and as you said, you started looking for other programs, I guess, and mentors. Was that something you did right away? Did you realize immediately, no, I need help with this? It's such a change from working as a senior professional in the NHS to running your own business.
Yes, I think I did realise early on that I was going to need some kind of support. I read a lot of books. So I read Rise of the Upreneurs, one of them, for example. So early on, I went out of my way to try and understand what running a business was all about, and marketing and sales funnels and all that kind of thing, trying to, it was all new language to me completely. So, and I've followed through with some support on the nutritional therapy side, some sort of specialist support for people starting out new businesses in that field as well. So I work with a lady called Gwen Warren, who runs a support hub there for nutritionists and nutritional therapists. So, and that has been really, really helpful too.
And you sent some beautiful photos, which I'll be sharing on the blog and in the show notes, of your lifestyle now. And it looks pretty good to me. But why don't you paint us a picture of what is the plus side now, I guess, on the changes you've made, and not just in terms of your career, but really in terms of the lifestyle that it affords you?
Yeah, so I don't have a 9-to-5 job at all. I do work quite a lot between 9 and 5, but it is very flexible. So as an example, yesterday I saw a client yesterday afternoon, which was a Sunday afternoon, and it's my choice to do that. But that also means I can take time off during the week when the sun shines, and climb a mountain or get out on my bike. So I'm quite flexible. I go wild swimming on a Friday afternoon sometimes, or climb a local hill I get out at lunchtime for a walk along the shore of the loch here, and I potter in the garden, if there's a chance, and things like that. So I'm definitely not rigid within my hours of work. I'm quite flexible. So sometimes I'll work evenings, sometimes I'll work a little bit. I try not to work much at the weekend, to be honest. It's more unusual, but it does have benefits because you can spend more time with the children during the holidays and that kind of thing too. So, I'm trying to fit it all in. But I am very, very careful to not overdo it and make sure that I have a balance, because I think once you've been down the burnout road, you are very conscious of not going back down that road. And it is easy to do it because you're at risk of doing it again.
And how do you balance that? How do you make sure the business is sustainable, both from having the financial stability and that being enough, I suppose, the viability, the profitability, but also, as you said, especially given your background, how can you make sure, it sounds like you're doing a great job being able to have that flexibility, but any tricks you use, or how do you really hold yourself accountable to make sure that you are achieving what you want to achieve, but at the same time you're being very careful not to go too far?
I think for me it's two things. One is I reprioritize what I do all the time. So I have a little notebook that sits at the side of my desk, and I have a list of things in there that need to do, but they are sort of split up between, longer term needs, things that have to be done today, and things that I want to find time for this week. So I try and I reprioritize every day. So I look at it and think, well, actually, what's the most important thing today? What doesn't need to get done today? But the other thing, the other thing I also do is I take time out if I'm feeling stressed. I stop 10 minutes and I meditate, or I go outside and take my coffee and sit on the step in the sunshine. So I'm really careful that if I notice any signs that I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed or stressed about something, that I make an effort to do something about it. And I think you do notice the signs much easier. So, and I've been nowhere close.
Amazing, good to hear.
On that road, fortunately.
Okay, and you've already shared some insights, I think, that would be really useful for people in a similar situation. For someone like you who perhaps is not there yet, or has burned out and has that disconnect in the organisation they're in, and is dreaming of this different, more flexible lifestyle, escaping that 9 to 5, what advice would you give them at this stage?
Well, I think it depends where on the spectrum you are. I think if you are fearing that you're burning out, then the priority is to look after your health at that point in time. And certain people are more likely to be at risk. There are personality types, for example, type A-driven personalities are kind of at risk, and also people who have very strong caring personality types who tend to be overgivers. They're also at risk of burnout, which is what you see sometimes in the caring professions as well. So I think, it is thinking about how you're going to rebalance your life. And there are lifestyle things you can do about that. Just from thinking about how you split your time. Do you actually give yourself any recovery time? Do you do things that bring joy to you? Do you look after yourself in terms of, are you eating well? Are you sleeping well? Are you getting outside in the fresh air? Are you getting gentle exercise? All those things are really important to do to begin with. And then I think you need to begin to think, well, once you've begun the basics of looking after yourself, you need to think, well, what do I want to do with my life? And that's a bigger discussion about pace of life, your values, where you'd like to see yourself in the future, how you'd like your life to be. And I guess that's your ballpark, really, isn't it? Your area of expertise.
Absolutely. But you make an important point that if you're really in that dark place of the actual burnout, you need to take care of yourself first. There's no point in trying to put pressure on yourself to reimagine what your career, what your lifestyle is going to look like if you are struggling to get out of bed in the morning and so on, right? So I love what you said there. Really, you need to take care of yourself first and foremost. And then hopefully you can begin to read some books, listen to some podcasts, start exploring without too much pressure, because of course that's counterproductive as well. And also I think it sounds like because you've had that experience as well, you've really found a really good way to have that self-awareness and to make sure you don't get there. But I suppose, especially as you said, in the caring type of roles, particular personality types, when we've started our business, the last thing we want to do is create that same stressful environment, ironically, because we are our own bosses and yet we're pushing ourselves, we're still just driven. And I think I see that especially with those of us who are helping others. We care so much. We are these youpreneurs who put our hearts and souls into these things, and we're really trying to make a difference in people's lives. And that can get quite dangerous because that can sort of overflow too much. It can integrate too much into our life as well. So I think the boundaries there are really important, not just when we're leaving that 9 to 5 for the first step, but also when we have succeeded in escaping there and are beginning to shape and build our business, of course, to be mindful of those things as well.
Absolutely, because it takes time. I mean, you can't transition perfectly overnight into a new business. It takes time to build the foundations, and sometimes, especially if you need to go out and get trained to do a new skill or something like that, then it's going to take you considerable time just to put the basics in place. And I think it always is. If you've been to a burnout position yourself, then it is really important to always put yourself first and thinking, is what I do good for me in the long run? Can I make this work? Is it going to provide the balance that I need in life? And it's not to say you can't be busy, because it's perfectly possible to be busy and have a balanced life and to enjoy what you're doing. The problem comes if you're not enjoying what you're doing and it's not balanced. Then that's perhaps where, things start to go a little bit wrong. And I think that over the last year, it's had its own particular challenges. So I'm actually in the lounge. I've got a standing desk in the lounge this year because my husband's been into my office and we're building an office in the garden for him. And I speak to a lot of women in particular, and I'm not saying men aren't in this position too, but there's probably more women who've had to homeschool children this year, and so they've been trying to do their work full time around the kitchen table with a child or two in tow, and constant constant interruptions and that kind of thing. And that it can be really quite difficult to manage all of that. And I certainly had to say to myself, whilst I was homeschooling as well, be kind to yourself and just accept you can't do everything that you plan.
Absolutely.
Take a bit longer. And we just have to accept that we're not always what you can't control. To some extent, you'd have to just accept and work.
Yeah, and the last year, of course, we're speaking early 2021 has been quite an exceptionally challenging year. And as you said, with the homeschooling and so on, and I love what you said about being kind to yourself. I have 2 little ones and I'm hearing them crying downstairs now. So it's always that challenge of getting the balance right. And I think my ambitions tend to sort of not get the better of me, but they tend to drive me forwards, which is fantastic. I love what I do, but always sort of taking that moment to think of what's really important. And okay, today maybe is not the day you're going to change the world. Maybe tomorrow you'll take another step, and it's sort of you're in it for the long haul, aren't you? So it's not to worry about a bad day, a bad week here and there. And what is a bad day, a bad week anyway? I think it depends how you measure life, I suppose.
It does, because, and also I look back and I have no regrets with what I've done. It's made me who I am today. I've learned a lot along the way. I absolutely love with a passion the work I did in the NHS and the teams that I worked with, who were all fantastic. So but having experienced burnout, it gives you a very different an understanding of life, I suppose, and on how the body works and mental health and how you relate to other people with similar situations and concerns, really. And I think it brings a whole different meaning to life itself, I suppose, and also makes you really value your energy when you have it and your health. Because it can support you.
Absolutely, and I like what you said there. It doesn't mean that you in any way regret if that was even a useful sentiment, which is not because there's nothing we can do to change it, but I think that's really important to sort of value the experiences we've had, the people we've met, the incredible impact you've been able to make in this case. But there is now a different phase of your life. You're for your own sake and for others, you're making an impact in a different way. So what's coming up for you this year then? What are you focusing on this year?
So I am I'm still learning as I go about my nutritional therapy business in terms of marketing. So marketing is my biggest thing this year in terms of doing things like
Perfect.
This,
You're very aligned to your strategy this year.
Get out there a bit more. Get out in the big wide world, not be scared about doing things like interviews and podcasts and being able to share more of my knowledge with people so that people know that there's a resource there that they can go to if they're looking for that kind of help as well. So that's on the nutrition side. On the skincare side, I'm also looking at developing some new products there, which is quite exciting, and building sort of collaborations as well on that front, and looking forward to when sporting.
Yes, fingers crossed.
Get back because.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of resources, I know you mentioned an ebook, and if you could tell us where we can find you, if we do want to read more about the work that you do and how you might be able to help, if you could share where we can find you online.
Yep, certainly. So my website is my name, really. It's www.moira.newiss.co.uk, and I can give you a link to the ebook itself. But anyone who signs up to my
perfect. So I'll be sure to link that in the show notes as well.
And there's some other, there's a little bit of other information on there too, and you can find out about.
Well, Moira, thank you so much for sharing your experience. So many insights there. It's always interesting to hear the things that we share from very different backgrounds, and also the things that might be unique to your experience. So I think that was a really powerful story to tell, and I hope you'll tell it much more, as you said, as you continue on your journey as well. Thank you so much for your time. If you'd like to create your own transition story and escape the 9-to-5 to work for yourself, then come and join us over in the Business Incubator. This is a comprehensive online program and community designed to give you the roadmap that you need to help you figure out what you really want to do, come up with a workable plan, and take the right steps to achieve it. Read more and join us over on onestepoutside.com/9-to-5. That's onestepoutside.com/9-to-5.